Life in Michigan had its ups and downs, but the summers were always something special. We were expecting an Indian summer that year, which meant beautiful, sunny days stretching into September. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind where you just had to be outside. The air was warm, and the sky was a brilliant blue, free from the oppressive humidity that sometimes made the air feel thick and sticky. My name is Samantha, but everyone calls me Sam. I was 12 years old, about to start 7th grade, and life was exciting. I had just made the varsity squad of the girls' baseball team, an achievement I was particularly proud of. It felt like I was finally coming into my own. I was one of 3 7th graders who had made the team, which was no small feat considering most of the team consisted of 8th graders. That Friday, our coach handed us a list of items we needed to buy for our uniforms over the weekend. One of the essentials was a pair of indoor basketball sneakers. I decided to take advantage of the gorgeous weather and walk the 2 miles to Dunham's Sporting Goods to get my sneakers. I put on a pair of cut-off jean shorts I had made from an old pair of jeans, a Steelers jersey that was a bit too short, and my favorite pair of Converse sneakers. I felt a sense of independence and excitement as I left the house, my mind already buzzing with the anticipation of my new sneakers. The walk to the store was uneventful, and I enjoyed the solitude, letting my mind wander as I took in the sights and sounds of my neighborhood. When I arrived at Dunham's, I found a sweet pair of Air Jordans that fit perfectly. They were a bit pricey, but I knew they were worth it. I paid for the sneakers, stuffed them into my backpack, and began the walk back home. As I walked, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. Making the varsity team was a big deal, and I was excited about the season ahead. But that sense of pride was soon overshadowed by a creeping sense of unease. About halfway home, a Jeep passed me, and the teenage male passenger leaned out of the window. "Hey, baby, I'll give you a ride," he shouted, sticking his tongue out in a way that made my skin crawl. I ignored him, as I had grown accustomed to doing. Unfortunately, early development had subjected me to unwanted attention from men, even though I was just 12. I turned down the main street that intersected with my own, still about 12 blocks from home. This street was busier, but the speed limit was only 25 miles per hour because it was a residential area. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a car slowing down. At first, I thought it was about to park, but as I continued walking, I realized it was keeping pace with me. My heart began to race when I noticed the driver was staring at me. It was an older model, a golden-colored Lincoln Town Car. The man behind the wheel looked to be around 40, and his gaze sent shivers down my spine. He looked like a predator stalking his prey. I heard the motor of the power window as he lowered it and called out to me, "Hey, honey, can I give you a ride somewhere? You've been walking for a while." I tried to stay calm, smiled politely, and said, "No, thank you. I live just up the block." I hoped that by pretending to be close to home, I would discourage him. "Oh, no problem," he replied, his voice unnervingly friendly. "Just get in, and I'll drive you the rest of the way. Your feet must be exhausted by now." His insistence made my stomach churn. He reminded me of Jack Nicholson's character in The Shining, with his low brow and intense, unsettling stare. I noticed a small toddler playing at an apartment building across the street and hoped that the presence of a child would make the man back off. I replied, "No, really, I'm fine. I make this trek often. I'm used to it." His demeanor changed abruptly. He threw the passenger door open and said, "I'm not asking. Get in the car." For a moment, I was paralyzed with disbelief. Who would be so bold as to try to abduct a 12-year-old girl in broad daylight on a busy road? I turned to him and asked, "What was that?" He unbuckled his seatbelt, put his car in park, and yelled louder. I said, Get in the car." A flood of adrenaline surged through my body. My eyes locked onto the toddler across the street. His parents must be home, I thought. I darted into the road, hoping that if the man grabbed me, passing cars would see and intervene. I heard the screech of brakes and a horn blaring as a middle-aged man slammed on his brakes to avoid hitting me. I didn't care. All I could think about was getting to that little boy. I reached the toddler, scooped him up, and ran toward the apartment building. Bursting through the door, I saw his mother standing at the kitchen sink, washing dishes. Her eyes widened in shock as I put her son down and rushed toward her. "I'm so sorry," I blurted out, "but a man just tried to abduct me on the busy road out there. I'm only 12 and I didn't know what to do. So I ran toward your son because I knew an adult had to be home. I'm so sorry for bursting in like this." She quickly calmed down and picked up her son, holding him protectively. "Are you okay, sweetie?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. "I'm just really scared." "You did the right thing," she assured me. "Do you want me to call the police?" My mind was racing. All I could think about was getting home to my mom. "No, I just need to call my mom. Can I use your phone?" She handed me the phone, and I dialed my mom's number. It rang and rang until the answering machine picked up. I left a frantic message, explaining what had happened and asking her to wait by the phone. I remembered she had planned to mow the lawn that day, so she probably couldn't hear the phone over the sound of the lawnmower. I sat in the apartment for another 15 minutes, repeatedly trying to call my mom. The woman offered again to call the police, but I declined, overwhelmed by the idea of police officers swarming around me. "I just want to get to my mom," I said, my voice trembling. "I understand," she replied, "but please, let me call the police. I don't think it's safe for you to be out there with that man still looking for you." I shook my head. "I only live 4 blocks up. I'll run through people's backyards until I get to my house. It'll be okay." "Are you sure?" she asked, clearly worried. "I wouldn't be able to forgive myself if something happened to you." "I'll be fine," I insisted. "Thank you so much for letting me stay here." With that, I rushed out of her back door, not giving her another chance to argue. Adrenaline still coursing through my veins, I ran like the wind, hopping fences and cutting through backyards. It felt like the longest run of my life, but eventually, I made it to my yard. I saw my mom putting the lawnmower away in the garage. I ran to her, collapsing into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Between gasps, I told her what had happened. She held me tightly, her face pale with fear. "Oh my God, Sam. I'm so sorry I didn't hear the phone. Thank God you're okay," she said, her voice shaking. She called the police, and I sat in the living room with an officer, recounting the events. I wished I had gotten the man's license plate number, but my only thought at the time was survival. They never caught the man, and the fear of what could have happened stayed with me. I often thought about the woman who let me into her home that day, risking her and her child's safety to help me. Her kindness and quick thinking might have saved my life. Ever since that day, I've prayed that no one else has to cross paths with that man or face the terror I experienced. In the days that followed, the incident remained a vivid, haunting memory. The golden Lincoln Town car, the man's predatory gaze, and the adrenaline-fueled sprint through backyards replayed in my mind. I tried to return to normalcy, but the fear lingered, casting a shadow over my daily life. I found solace in my friends and family, who rallied around me with support and reassurance. My mom, especially, was a pillar of strength. She insisted on driving me to and from school, and I didn't argue. The thought of walking those streets alone was too much to bear. Despite the precautions, The sense of vulnerability was hard to shake. Every time I saw a car that remotely resembled the one driven by my would-be abductor, my heart would race, and I'd feel a surge of panic. I couldn't help but scan the faces of passing drivers, half expecting to see those cold, predatory eyes staring back at me. School became a refuge, a place where I could immerse myself in classes and activities, temporarily forgetting the fear that had invaded my life. My friends were unaware of the full extent of what had happened, and I preferred it that way. I didn't want to be seen as the girl who was almost kidnapped. I wanted to be known for my accomplishments, for making the varsity baseball team, and for being a good friend. Coach Johnson, our baseball coach, was an incredible mentor. He noticed that something was off, but didn't press me for details. Instead, he encouraged me to channel my emotions into the game. "Use that energy, Sam," he would say. "Let it fuel you on the field." One evening, after a particularly intense practice, Coach Johnson pulled me aside. "Sam, I've seen a lot of determination in you lately. Whatever you're going through, just know that you're strong, and you have a team that supports you." His words meant more to me than he could have known. They reminded me that I wasn't alone, that I had a network of people who cared about me. It gave me the courage to face each day, even when the fear threatened to overwhelm me. Despite my efforts to move forward, the paranoia persisted. I started carrying my hair stick with me everywhere, its sharp prongs a constant reminder of the danger I had narrowly escaped. It gave me a sense of security, knowing that I had a means of defense if needed. The neighborhood began to feel different, too. What once felt like a familiar, safe environment now seemed fraught with potential threats. Every passerby was scrutinized. Every parked car was a potential hiding place. It was exhausting, but necessary. Months passed, and the seasons changed. The vibrant colors of summer faded into the crispness of autumn, and with it, a gradual sense of normalcy returned. I began to let my guard down, bit by bit, as the immediate fear subsided. But the experience had changed me. I was more cautious, more aware of my surroundings, and more determined than ever to protect myself and those I cared about. One crisp fall afternoon, my friend Emily and I decided to walk to the local park. It was a beautiful day, and the trees were adorned with shades of red, orange, and yellow. We chatted about school, boys, and our plans for the weekend. For a moment, it felt like everything was back to normal. As we approached the park, I noticed a familiar car parked nearby. My heart skipped a beat, and a wave of nausea washed over me. It was the same golden Lincoln Town car. I grabbed Emily's arm, my voice trembling. "Emily, we need to leave. Now." She looked at me, confused. "What's wrong, Sam?" "That car," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's the same car from that day." Understanding dawned on her face, and she nodded. "Okay, let's go." We turned and walked briskly in the opposite direction, my heart pounding in my chest. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see the man following us. But the car remained parked, and there was no sign of him. We reached Emily's house, and I collapsed onto the porch, my legs shaking. "I can't believe he's still around," I said, my voice choked with fear. Emily hugged me tightly. "It's okay, Sam. You're safe now. We're going to figure this out." We decided to go to the police station together, armed with the new information about the car. This time, the officers took us seriously. They assured us that they would increase patrols in the area and keep an eye out for the golden Lincoln Town car. There's something about the serene quiet of a small college town after dark that always felt comforting, yet eerie. I was living in Carsonville, a quaint town housing a bustling university, and a lively downtown area that students like me often frequented. My apartment was conveniently located, just a short walk from the main strip of bars and eateries, making it an ideal spot for someone who spent as much time at the library as they did enjoying the nightlife. It was a typical weeknight, and I found myself buried in the pages of an economics textbook, preparing for an upcoming exam. The digital clock on my desk read 2:15 a.m., a silent testament to my dedication, or perhaps my procrastination. Needing a break, I decided to step out onto our front porch for a smoke and a moment of peace. The cool night air was a welcome reprieve from the stuffiness of my room. I settled on the steps, the textbook laid open beside me, and lit a cigarette. The crisp sound of the lighter breaking the night's silence felt oddly therapeutic. As I took my first drag, savoring the calm, I noticed movement from the corner of my eye. A girl, whom I recognized by sight but not by name, lived one apartment over on the ground floor. She was returning home, alone, her steps uneven, a clear sign she'd had a long night out. She fumbled with her keys and managed to get herself inside just as the quiet of the night was shattered again, this time by a sharp knock. I squinted through the dim porch light to see a man standing at her door. It struck me as odd, the time, the urgency in his knock. It wasn't someone you'd expect at 2:30 in the morning. Curiosity piqued. I remained outside, feigning deep concentration on my textbook while keeping an ear tuned to the unfolding situation. The girl opened the door, and the stranger introduced himself. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. Who was he, and what was he doing here at this hour? Something about him didn't sit right with me. They talked. It was a lengthy conversation that seemed one-sided. From my perch, I watched him reach out and stroke her hair multiple times, a gesture so unsettling in its intimacy from a supposed stranger. I noticed him inching closer to her, his movements subtle yet deliberate. Feeling a protective surge, I shuffled my textbook loudly against the steps, making my presence unmistakably known. The man glanced my way, his expression unreadable in the shadowed light. After a few tense seconds, he muttered a goodbye and disappeared into the night as silently as he had arrived. Shaken, I went over to check on the girl. Her name was Emily, and she was visibly upset. She admitted she felt trapped in the conversation but didn't know how to safely end it. Deciding it was best to involve the authorities, we called the police. The next few days were a blur of police visits and discussions. Emily and I sat down with a sketch artist, providing details that would form the face of the man who had knocked on her door that night. When the sketch was circulated publicly, the response was overwhelming. Calls flooded in, and a horrifying truth emerged. The man was a known serial rapist, notorious for preying on women who walked home alone from bars. His usual tactic involved posing as a cab driver, offering rides to unsuspecting victims. Emily had been fortunate. Living so close to the downtown area, she'd avoided falling prey to his ruse. In the days following the police report, our quiet college town felt different. The incident had rattled the sense of security I once took for granted, leaving a tangible tension in the air. Students were more cautious, nighttime gatherings dwindled, and the local bars implemented new safety protocols. The community was shaken, but also united in a way that I had never seen before. Emily and I kept in touch, bound by the strange and terrifying experience we had shared. She was more shaken than she let on initially, haunted by the what-ifs and the close call she had narrowly escaped. It wasn't just the physical safety that had been threatened that night. It was the psychological peace that was harder to reclaim. Meanwhile, the police investigation intensified. With the sketch now public and tips pouring in, It wasn't long before they had a suspect in custody. The man was indeed the serial predator they had feared, linked to multiple assaults in neighboring towns. The news of his capture brought a collective sigh of relief from the community, but it was a grim reminder of the dangers that lurked, sometimes closer than we imagined. The end of May 1999 was a time of great anticipation and excitement for me. I was on the cusp of entering my freshman year of high school, and my summer was about to begin with an unforgettable adventure. Along with 6 girls from my church youth group, we embarked on a mission trip that would take us up the picturesque coast from Riverside, California, all the way to Mount St. Helens in Washington. The journey promised to be filled with memorable experiences, scenic views, and unbeknownst to us at the time, a brush with danger that we would only come to understand years later. Our convoy consisted of an old, slightly battered Chevy van and a trusty station wagon. The vans were driven by 3 of the girls' mothers, who also doubled as our chaperones. Despite their parental roles, they were just as enthusiastic about the trip as we were, ready to share in the joys and challenges that awaited us on the road. We piled into the vehicles, our excitement bubbling over as we left Riverside behind and headed toward the Pacific Coast Highway, or PCH as the locals call it. The first leg of our journey was marked by laughter, singing, and the kind of carefree conversations that only a group of teenage girls can have. The van was filled with the sound of our favorite songs, mixed with the hum of the engine and the occasional comments from our chaperones reminding us to behave. The scenery along the PCH was breathtaking, with the ocean stretching out on one side and the rugged cliffs and hills on the other. It was a quintessential Californian road trip, and we were living every moment of it to the fullest. Our first major stop was at San Luis Obispo, a charming town with a rich history. We visited the historic mission where I had the honor of being baptized. It was a deeply moving experience, surrounded by friends who felt like family, and in a place that seemed to hold a special kind of serenity. The mission's old adobe walls and tranquil gardens provided the perfect backdrop for this significant milestone in my spiritual journey. From San Luis Obispo, we continued north to San Francisco, a city that had always captivated my imagination. We spent 3 days exploring its famous landmarks, riding the iconic cable cars, walking along Fisherman's Wharf, and marveling at the majesty of the Golden Gate Bridge. San Francisco's vibrant energy was infectious, and we soaked it all in, from the foggy mornings to the bustling evenings filled with street performers and lively markets. After San Francisco, our route took us through the state capital of Sacramento and into Oregon. Each stop added another layer to our adventure. We explored the quirky, eco-friendly city of Portland, visited the stunning Crater Lake, and reveled in the natural beauty that surrounded us at every turn. It felt like we were on a grand tour of the Pacific Northwest, each day bringing new sights and experiences that we eagerly documented in our journals and cameras. Our journey reached a significant point when we arrived at Yosemite National Park. Yosemite's breathtaking landscapes, with its towering cliffs, majestic waterfalls, and ancient sequoias, left us in awe. We stayed at the Cedar Lodge, a rustic yet comfortable lodge that promised us a few nights of rest and exploration. The first day was spent hiking and taking in the beauty of the park, our spirits high despite the physical exertion. However, on the second day, our adventure took an unexpected turn. As we were driving back to the lodge after a day of sightseeing, the old Chevy van suddenly sputtered and came to a halt in the middle of nowhere. Panic set in as we realized we had no cell signal to call for help, and we were miles away from any kind of assistance. We were stranded, and the vast wilderness around us felt more isolating than ever. As the minutes turned into an hour, anxiety began to creep in. Just when we thought we might have to spend the night in the van, a kind stranger appeared. He stopped his car and offered to help, showing a level of generosity and compassion that restored our faith in humanity. He managed to get in touch with a nearby mechanic, who came out and took a look at the van. The news wasn't good. The mechanic informed us that the engine had been tampered with. Someone had intentionally sabotaged it. The realization that someone had deliberately tried to harm us was chilling. Our chaperones were visibly upset, and the mood among us girls shifted from excitement to fear. We abandoned the van and rented a vehicle to continue our journey, but the incident left a lasting impact on all of us. The sense of vulnerability lingered, casting a shadow over the remainder of our trip. Despite the unsettling experience, we continued on to our final destination, Mount St. Helens in Washington. The imposing volcano, with its snow-capped peak and surrounding wilderness, provided a stark reminder of nature's power and beauty. We spent our last days of the trip reflecting on everything we had seen and experienced, from the joyous moments to the moments of fear and uncertainty. It wasn't until years later that I learned the full extent of the danger we had narrowly escaped. Carrie Anthony Steiner, known as the Yosemite Killer, had been working as a maintenance man at the Cedar Lodge during our stay. He had already committed horrific crimes, and just a month after we were there, he gained access to a room under the guise of performing maintenance, only to abduct and murder the occupants. The thought that we had been in such close proximity to a killer was horrifying. It was a sobering reminder of how fragile life can be and how quickly a situation can turn dangerous. Reflecting on that trip, I realized how incredibly lucky we were. The adventure that started as a joyful mission trip could have ended in tragedy. The experience taught me about the unpredictability of life and the importance of staying vigilant. It also reinforced the bonds of friendship and faith that had carried us through the journey. The memories of that summer remain vivid, a mix of wonder and fear, joy and caution, all woven into the fabric of my teenage years. As I sit here writing, I'm filled with a sense of gratitude for the experiences that have shaped me. That mission trip up the coast was more than just a series of destinations. It was a journey of growth and discovery. It opened my eyes to the beauty and danger of the world, teaching me lessons that have stayed with me ever since.